House, Camden Yards. On Monday, the weather gods held up. The baseball gods held up. Kevin Gausman held up. Luke Jones held up. He joins us now to recap all things. You know, after a day like Monday, and I know that the reason they give you Tuesday off, Luke, it's sort of it's the rain day, and we've used that day on several occasions here in Baltimore, but it's a little bit of a toweling off period. There's a lot of hangover going on around Baltimore on a Tuesday after that kind of win, right?
Oh, no doubt about it, especially when you play a couple extras to get that win. Clearly opening day, it's an event. There's no doubt about it. I have friends who might not go to more than one or two games the rest of the year, but they try to make it for opening day. So you have that kind of crowd. It was an interesting game in a lot of ways. I think, beyond the obvious and knowing that the stakes weren't nearly as high, it reminded you a little bit of the wild card game last October. 2-2 in the 11th inning, and only this time around, played in Baltimore. And, Zach Britton got in the game and pitched 2 scoreless innings.
He did okay. Imagine how that would have worked out in October.
I know, right? And we didn't even have to see Ubaldo Jimenez. We'll see him on Friday against the Yankees. But I think really nice win, no doubt about that. As you mentioned, Kevin Gausman, who clearly labored, clearly had some issues with his control, and that's something we, for all the talk about young pitchers and seeing them develop, Kevin Gausman's never really had issues with his control, but I think a little bit amped up on his side and going up against the lineup that he's had trouble against in the past, and a lineup that really good from an on-base percentage standpoint, so the work counts. They're not going to swing at bad pitches, and that really bit him in the 5th inning, and that's why he couldn't go deeper in the game. But overall, when you get a performance like that, where you pitch that well, and knowing that the state of this current starting rotation is uncertain and uneasy at best, you have to take advantage when you get a pitching performance like that across the board. Give up 2 runs over 11 innings, and Mark Trumbo comes up in the bottom of the 11th and gets the job done, hits the home run off Jason Grilli. And I thought it was amazing, Ness. Trumbo on Sunday, when they had the workout at the ballpark, had actually been asked if he made anything out of the fact that he didn't hit any home runs in the Grapefruit League. And this was one of their few regulars who was there all spring. He didn't play in the WBC, and he said very matter-of-factly that, well, I had a spring a few years back where I didn't hit any home runs, and I hit over 30 that season, so I think I'll be okay. And sure enough, a day later, he ends up being the hero.
Well, you mentioned Gausman, you mentioned control issues. Battling out of the inning where he gave up 1 run when the bases were loaded and, they got the pop-up. I'll tell you what, that was huge. I tweeted about it. I was on the club level at that point watching the game with a bunch of people. I had been down in the bowl the first couple of innings, and I saw him get into trouble, and I thought, well, this is kind of a turning point because this could easily turn into a 4-run inning or a 5-run inning, and that would have been the end of that, right? As it turned out, the way they hit the ball and the way the other side threw the ball, and it didn't work out like that. That's where we used to see the old Arrieta unravel. That's where we used to see Cabrera unravel. That's where we would see Jimenez unravel. It's your number 1 starter. If you're going to be a number 1 starter, you're going to have innings where you struggle. You're going to get hit. You're going to have errors. You're going to have things happen. Things are going to go wrong. It didn't go that wrong. And when you can put a Band-Aid on a really bad inning, and that being said, the early innings for the Orioles bats, they did not cash in. They had the exact opposite effect. They couldn't get an RBI, early in the game. And you're like, man, just squeeze one across here and get it going. And it really turned out to be, much like you said last October, that game, that 2-2 game, and it's late and it's tied, and who's going to get a big hit? And in the cases of these 2 teams, you knew it was going to be home run, right? Because that's what they do, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And even I heard a comment John Gibbons made after the game. And
it wasn't going to be a walk, a sacrifice, a stolen base, and a fly ball.
Right.
That's not these teams, man.
But he said it, and I thought it resonated with me when I saw the comment. He said, when you play the Orioles on the road and knowing the home run ability they have, when you're in a close game like this, you're not feeling good because you know that they can do exactly what Trumbo did in the bottom of the 11th. So, we know that's how the Orioles operate. They're going to have some games. And, oh, by the way, Marco Estrada is a really good starting pitcher. So it's not as though getting 2 runs in 6 innings is anything to be ashamed of. But it was very clear after that 3rd inning when they hit the doubles, Davis and Trumbo both drive in runs and have a 2-0 lead. They were, at the time that Trumbo hit the game-winning home run, they had gone 3 for 26 from that point on in the 3rd inning when Trumbo had hit the RBI double. So they clearly struggled offensively for large stretches of that game, but you just said it. I mean, the key was Kevin Gausman being able to minimize the damage in the 5th inning. And it's funny, you mentioned Arrieta because as soon as you brought that up, I was thinking of Jake Arrieta right off the bat. And it's not as though he was the only pitcher who had those kind of issues with the Orioles over the last, however many years you want to go back with young pitchers that they were counting on. But this is where we've seen growth from Kevin Gausman. And had a really good year last year, had a great final 2 months. And, it was clear that he didn't have the precise control that he normally has. And, Toronto's a team that's going to make you work. And, if you're missing around the edges of the strike zone, they're not going to expand. So, it was good to see him be able to do what he did. It wasn't a great start. You go 5 1/3 innings, it's hard to call it a great start, but he was able to minimize the damage, and he put his team in good position to be able to turn it over to the bullpen. And as Buck Showalter always said, stay engaged in the game, and the Orioles were able to do that. The other thing we need to mention, some of the phenomenal defensive plays. I mean, Manny Machado in the top of the 11th. Chris Davis dug 3 or 4 balls out of the dirt. Those are plays that don't show up in the box score, but certainly if you watched the game, you saw how big the Orioles defense, specifically the infield defense, was over the course of that one. And that's what you need to do when you're a team that has questions about your starting rotation. You need to be really good in all other areas of the game. And even though the Orioles, 3 runs, nothing to write home about, but defensively and obviously their bullpen, save for Michael Givens giving up the tying run, bullpen pitched really well. So that's the formula if they're going to try to win without scoring 8 or 9 runs in a given night.
For all the pomp and circumstance of opening day, it's a very comfortable thing, right? For the Adam Joneses and the Trumbos, and I mean, there's a lot of veteran guys now. I mean, Machado, Scope, they've been down this road before. They played in playoff games. It doesn't. Opening day doesn't feel big, and there have been some times where especially when we didn't have good teams around here for a decade and a half. Back when I was a real media member, that it would kind of eat them up. They kicked the ball around. There was just always sort of this nervous energy. This group's not there. And by the way, I love the USA chants for Adam Jones. I'm sure he does too.
Yeah.
That's an interesting part of his 30s now, right? Like that, because we remember him being the snot-nosed kid running around here trying to make his way, and and now that leadership that when your guy comes to the bat, people in the stands are going to chant USA, USA. I saw USA Jones jerseys, around the ballpark. People were buying those. So, there is something about the comfort level with the fan base with this group of players, and part of that is bringing a Trumbo back, and I think part of that was the disappointment of not having a Cruz around. And I've been talking to Toronto people all week about not having Encarnacion. There is when you take that kind of bat out of your lineup, you start to wonder, where is that? The Red Sox are going to have to worry about that with Ortiz too. But this is a comfortable group of Orioles. Chris Davis straight on through, right?
It really is. And you mentioned Adam Jones. I mean, this was his 10th straight opening day. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think that the Eric Bedard trade has been that long
Well, as
ago.
an example, I mean, did Brady Anderson have 10 opening days? I mean, going back to players, did Melvin Mora have 10 opening days? Did Brian Roberts have 10? I don't know, but it's starting to, the years are piling up. I mean, it's starting to add up for sure.
Yeah, it is. I think Markakis was at 8. I think.
Yeah, and it feels like he was here forever, right?
Yeah. So, right? but in the case of Jones, the other thing I got to add, I have to add this, being the wrestling fan I am.
Oh boy, here we go.
For Real American, Hulk Hogan's theme song. I mean, but as getting back to your point about the overall makeup of this club, look, we know that there's some shortcomings there. There's no doubt about that, but you can say that about most teams in baseball, other than maybe, the Cubs, maybe? That might be one team you look to and say, I don't see a real obvious weakness. I mean, even, Boston looks like the clear favorite in this division. We've talked about that, but, there's some questions about that bullpen. They have some questions at the health of that rotation right now. You mentioned David Ortiz. I mean, that's, his absence. There's a shock value to that I think you have to be able to overcome.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out with Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, right?
Right. I mean, and that's not to say the teams, that the show doesn't go on. I mean, everyone understands on paper that, okay, well, great players retire and guys move on in free agency, or you trade guys, or whatever can happen. I mean, you don't have the exact same team year in and year out, but when you lose players like that can be an adjustment. So that's where, as much as we've talked about the Orioles, we know about the starting rotation. We know that this offense is built around the home run. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, there is something to be said about the continuity that they have been able to breed, and the fact that they've been as successful as they have over the last 5 years. They haven't finished the job. I think there's definitely an urgency there, knowing where they're heading as far as free agency and some guys with club control expiring and things like that over the next couple of years. But in the meantime, you have a team that's quite similar to what they had last year, and they won 89 games. So, that's why, you and I talking about this a few days ago as far as expectations, I think there is something to be said about the fact that they're bringing back a fairly similar team to what they had last year. Now, those same weaknesses that they had last year, probably not going away this year, but at the same time, we joke about beer league softball and the rotation and the bullpen. Every year we talk about it being taxed and they're going to wear down. They seem to find a way to make it work, and certainly getting off to a winning start on opening day. Nice to see that. And another thing I want to point out, kind of amazing, as I was thinking personally, being in the press box, this was my 8th opening day that I've covered. The Orioles 7-0 in their last 7 season openers, and they've been really good under Buck Showalter in that department. And as much as opening day is symbolic, it's 1 out of 162. When you look at where this club was for the longest time prior to 2012, at least getting to 1-0, you put all thoughts of. I remember they were 2-16 to start the 2010 season when Tremblay got axed in early June, and you just think of getting off to the season on a winning note. I think there's some value to that, and certainly you have to be good enough. It doesn't assure you of anything other than the fact that you're 1-0, and that's one less game you have to win later in the season. But nice to see the Orioles get off to a good start, and as you pointed out, a team that had, despite a couple changes here and there, very similar feel to what we saw last year.
He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net if you need to reach him. This is an interesting time. Back when I did know these players better and I was their age, this is a really scramble time for them, right? I mean, especially like the young single guys that jump off a plane from Florida, have to play the biggest game of the year. They get one day down. Baseball players get no time off. I mean, doing laundry, picking out condos, settling down, all of their gear. It's a really frenetic week, right? Like, for a guy that walks in and out of the clubhouse, let me guess, Luke, there's suitcases everywhere, right?
Yeah, lots of boxes, and you're right. I mean, the young
it's
guys...
It's chaotic. I don't think fans... that's what I remember about opening day week, being a guy who was in that locker room for 20 years, this period of time, that there's... Literally, it's their first chance to sort of exhale, and they don't know where the Beltway is usually when they haven't been to Baltimore in months. It's a shock to the system a little bit to come home.
It definitely is, and especially for those younger guys, as you mentioned, the Trey Mancinis, the Oliver Drakes, and I guess the good news for two guys like that, they both have some roots in this area, so that might help them. But guys are getting apartments or guys just renting a room at one of the hotels downtown. They're trying to transition. And look, everyone listening to this is saying, well, these guys are making, even the young guys are making high six figures. So yeah, but there's still, time is a very precious thing for a baseball player. I mean, when you are playing oftentimes even 7 days a week and maybe getting one day off every 2 weeks, you try to take advantage of that. But the young guys and even some of the veterans, even as they're trying to get themselves settled in after being away during the off season, your head spins a little bit. So it's nice to win on opening day. You get a day to kind of catch your breath, and then you're right back to it on Wednesday. And they have another off day on Thursday. Kind of a weird start to the season from a scheduling standpoint. It's just a 2-game set with Toronto. I'm not sure what the reason was behind that, but they'll get a couple days off here, and nice to have a couple days off considering the bullpen was not completely used up, but several guys worked in Monday's win.
Yeah, I thought they were going to play 18. When it went to extra innings, I'm like, they're going to be here all night. Weather's starting to dip a little bit. The rain might be coming in, and if they had started that game at 5 o'clock, it would have been wet in the 7th inning. That's for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, if that game had gone, maybe they would have had another inning. If they had gone longer than that, I think anyone who was in the Baltimore area on Monday evening, they could see what the weather was like. That would have been very, very disappointing. Would have been a long wait. And perhaps, I don't know what the remedy would have been, but Mark Trumbo sends everyone home happy, and I guess he picks up right where he left off in 2016.
Dude, I watched a lot of baseball, right? I mean, I watched Greinke, and I watched Mad Bum hit home runs off of him Sunday. I watched the Yankees get their ass kicked, and up in the middle of the night, I'm watching the Cubs come back and in the 9th inning, 3-run home run, and then still lose. The Padres only gave up 14 on opening day at Dodger Stadium. But then there's basketball, right? And I don't hate Carolina as much as I hate Duke, right? I just don't. I don't know why. I used to hate Carolina a lot more when I was younger. I didn't feel really good about them winning on Monday night, but it's disgraceful that they play these games in a dome. It's disgraceful that they get a surface that the best player on the second-best team turns his ankle with 1:45 left. And I mean, it looked like his ankle was about to snap in half with a minute left to go in the game. And he went back out there and ran around, not very effective at the end of the game. But, that was a really sloppy basketball game on Monday night for being two teams that were pretty good basketball teams, right?
It was awful. I was even, I have a texting thread with some of my buddies from high school, and one of my best friends, I was a groomsman in his wedding. He didn't go to North Carolina, but he grew up a Tar Heels fan. I think it was just a Michael Jordan thing. And he said, just a terribly awesome game. And he only said awesome because Carolina won, but just sloppy. You look at the field goal percentage. Just across the board.
Well, that's playing in a blimp, right? I mean, that no one can get a depth perception when you shoot baskets in an arena. It's a whole different world, man. I think the air's different in those domes. I mean, I feel that way when I'm in a football dome. When I walk down onto the field there, you feel the wind blowing around. I mean, the way the jets and it affects shots. It's awful, and they've been doing it for a quarter of a century, and they're a bunch of corporate whores, and they all want to make money, and it's great. But what usually results is it'd be like playing baseball in the Pacific Ocean. It doesn't look right to me ever.
Yeah, it's definitely strange. That's why you know me being a guy who went to Syracuse for a couple of years. I mean, they always had that advantage because they played in the Carrier Dome, which not exactly the same thing because they split the Carrier Dome in half and they.
But when a team gets off the bus and walks in there and has to shoot in that building,
it's just cavernous. Yeah.
Yeah, you look up and you're losing 24-6 because they haven't missed and you haven't made, right? I mean, at least through the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah. It's just, but this game and what's amazing, they just couldn't make shots. I mean, it wasn't even so much about turnovers. I think Gonzaga had 14. Carolina only had 4 turnovers in this game. So it's not as though it was that sloppy in that regard, but they just couldn't make any shots. I mean, it's just, it's painful to watch that. And, as someone who generally enjoys watching college basketball more than the NBA, I don't know. Like, you watch something like that, and you just kind of say, well, I don't know. This wasn't exactly a great example for those who try to argue that they like the college game better than the NBA. It just wasn't a very appealing basketball game. And I had to mention this. I saw it on Twitter shortly after the game. Someone was talking about the fact that Roy Williams, I think, gets an $800,000 bonus or something along those lines, and then said, and his players, Well, they get really nice hats and T-shirts for winning the national championship, and I had to chuckle about that. So there's that whole part of the argument. But you're right. I mean, the whole I mean, it's not changing. I mean, they've been playing the Final Four in a dome for years, but it just, I don't know. This really left me wanting more in terms of a national championship game. But, on the flip side, given what North Carolina went through last year with Villanova just ripping their hearts out at the buzzer, I think a redemption story for them, but I'm like you, not a Carolina fan, so I can't say I feel all that great for that program.
Yeah, I have a feeling beer was spilled on the floor down at Spanky's in Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
Luke Jones joining us here. All right, last thing for you, man. This is, from the baseball perspective and the bat, this is a pretty good time of year, right? I mean, weather gets into the 70s. We got Caps playoffs next week. For NBA people, that'll start 2 weeks from now. The Masters, this is when people start to come out of their shell a little bit. Spring is sprung, I think, right?
Well, I love it. I mean, we had WrestleMania on Sunday.
Yeah, give me a little recap on that. I want to give you the floor for that because I don't give you that opportunity. How did that go with The Undertaker? Dude, you were all nerd boyed up, man. You were like, you had fanboy going on Sunday night.
There's no doubt. The Undertaker, they had him main event WrestleMania, even though it wasn't for the title. He went up against Roman Reigns, who's a relative of The Rock, a Samoan blood, great talent.
Is that a grandchild of the High Chief Peter Maivia?
I can't. No, he's not. He's not. Because he's not. I think he's a second cousin to The Rock or something like that.
I was just trying to show you my wrestling
that's
knowledge.
impressive. The High Chief, no doubt.
saw the High Chief many. I saw every one of his tattoos.
Yeah, that's
he was the most tattooed man on earth. Yeah, that's right.
But so they had that match last, so that kind of tipped you off that something was going on with the Undertaker here. They didn't say it was his final match or anything like that. They hadn't hyped it like that, but it very clearly had a old versus new kind of feel to it. I mean, Undertaker, I think, is 52 years old. Roman Reigns is 30 or 31. Clearly a guy that they've pegged to kind of be their, not just their present, but their future big star. And, the match itself was pretty forgettable. I mean, Undertaker at this point, I've said this all along, it's just like in any other sport. You have guys who hold on too long, and he's a guy who probably should have hung up the wrestling boots 5 or 6 years ago. The match was just blah. But the aftermath, really cool. Anyone who's followed WWE, WWF since the early 90s, I mean, Undertaker made his debut at Survivor Series 1990. And to see him go out the way he did, he put on his hat, he put on the jacket, he had his fighting gloves that he typically wears in the center of the ring. And then, as his theme song played, as he got a big ovation, he took that stuff off and left it in the center of the ring and walked back up the ramp. Very, very much symbolic of saying this is it for me. Nothing official, but kind of a cool ending for him and amazing to think. I'm 33 years old. Undertaker debuted in WWF at the time when I was 7, and to think that in this day and age, especially with the internet and the amount of pro wrestling that's on TV. I mean, when I was a kid, we had Superstars on Saturday. You had Saturday night's main event 3 or 4 times a year, if that. And you had the 4 pay-per-views. So, it was very much a much more limited...
Did you have Sir Alfred Hayes? Was that your era, or were you too young for that?
Lord Alfred Hayes, that was the tail end of his run. I remember him kind of just doing...
Well, when they shot those goofy things they did here in Owings Mills back in the 80s. You remember those?
Yeah.
All right, good enough.
But with the Taker, I mean, for him to have the longevity that he's had, the amount of respect that he has, he's not the biggest star they've ever had, but the amount of time, when you're talking about a guy who spent 2.5 decades plus with WWE, and no one else can say that. Hulk Hogan went to WCW, and Stone Cold Steve Austin was in WCW.
See, I didn't know that. You're educating me now. This is where I get a sandwich, and so that is true, right? I mean, there used to be the competition, right? It's a monopoly now, kind of, sort of.
Yeah,
when you get to that
level, a little bit of competition here and there, but he was there. He was the guy who stayed in the '90s when the ratings war heated up and WCW got big, and they had the NWO, and they were beating WWF in the ratings war for a long time.
Before they got the F out.
Yeah, right. But Taker stuck around. He was the franchise for a long time, and in the last few years, he'd been more of a part-time attraction. Kind of wrestle at WrestleMania, maybe one other time a year. But to see him kind of get that send off, and hey, he lost the match. That's the old school pro wrestler. You don't go out on top; you go out on your back, and you put over a younger talent, and that's what he did. And that was clearly a highlight to see that. And Taker's never been my absolute favorite. I've never been that I've been a number one Taker fan, but anyone who loves the business, anyone who loves pro wrestling, you have great respect for what he did over the course of his career. And if this is it, and I hope it is, because anyone who's seen him the last couple of years, you see that he just doesn't move around. He's 52 years old. I mean, why would he? You hope that this is it, and if so, he really went out in a special way, and a huge crowd down in Orlando. They'll never forget that.
Yeah, I want to welcome all of my friends back to Baltimore who were down in Orlando. It felt like about half of my timeline on Sunday night.
Oh, same here. It's crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't why this year everyone ran around. I guess Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. My kid was even in Orlando over the weekend. So, all right, well, Luke will be on the scene all week long. We're around all week. I mean, Ed and I will be watching the Caps. We got the Wizards in play now, and of course the Orioles day by day, night by night, 161 and maybe more to go. I don't think they're a playoff team. I'm sticking to that, even though it was an exciting win on Monday. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. We're out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day for anything that you miss around here. It's very easy to find us. Our morning newspaper also ships to your email inbox. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And last but never least, breaking news does happen first on the WNST text service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. We've got the Liars Luncheon coming up this week, so we definitely got some football. We are trying to get Nashville, Green Bay, Minnesota, all the other trips. Who the hell knows where the Raiders are going to play? We're getting that together for the road trips. Lots of people stopped me at the stadium on Monday asking about road trips and this and that. $100 off on the London trip right now. Toss me a note. We'll get you going on that. You can also, obviously, always find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.